What's happening, family? I pray all is well with you and yours. Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. I'm a third generation vet. My grandfather, he fought in World War I. He was in the Army. My dad was Air Force, and he served over in Europe. And I was in the Army, and I served in a United Nations command in Panmunjom, Korea, and in the President's Ceremonial Unit in Washington, D.C. It's interesting that I would enlist in the military. I was probably the most unpatriotic person that you ever wanted to see. In high school, every morning, they had announcements and the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem and silent prayer, and I refused to stand for it. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And as a result, I was asked to leave the classroom and stand outside the classroom. And I didn't have a problem with that. I would get up and go outside. Now, I would pray, but I just refused to salute a flag. I just couldn't see the value in it. Um, so you skip from that to when I graduated. I graduated from high school, and I was in my mom's backyard digging up her vegetable garden. My mom's is from the South, and she always had a vegetable garden in her backyard. So I was in the backyard the day after I graduated, digging my mom's vegetable garden, and I had an epiphany that if I didn't do something then, that's all that I was going to be able to do for the rest of my life is manual labor. Now, don't get me wrong. There ain't nothing wrong with manual labor if that's what you into. But I wanted more for myself. And while I was out there digging, a good friend of mine came by, and he was going into the Army. And I just thought, I said, bro, listen, if you can talk to your recruiter and your recruiter can get me in on the buddy plan with you, I'm going into the Army. So he left and went and talked to his recruiter. And long story short, 9 days after we graduated high school, we were on our way to boot camp. Boot camp or basic training was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. It's like having an all-day football practice and then pledging a fraternity at night. It was really, really intense. And I thought, well, you know what? I played a little bit of football, but I played sports, and so I know how to work out. So this is not going to be nothing. Well, what an eye-opening experience. It was, as I said, the most intense thing that I ever did in my life. And mind you, I left to go into the service 9 days after I graduated high school. So I didn't get a chance to hang out or really say goodbye to folks or what have you. So, for after a short period of time in basic training, I was missing home. And, it was the first time that I had been that far away from home for an extended period of time. And I'll never forget, we had 1 day off after they had been kicking our behind for weeks. And I went inside the barracks and nobody else was in the barracks. And I sat on my footlocker and I looked out the window, second floor, and they had these trees and I looked over the trees and it was like I could see home and I could see everybody home partying, doing their thing, having fun. And I was one miserable soul brother and I was hurting. I mean, every muscle in my body hurt. My hair hurt. They just kicked our behinds. But I was sitting there and something happened. Well, I was crying, to tell you the truth. I had big crocodile tears coming down my face, but I couldn't let these brothers see me cry though. But I was crying, and this brother came up there, and he was going through something too, and he sat on my bunk. So I'm wiping my face. He said, "Al," he said, "we're going to make a pact. From this day forward, there's nothing that these folks can do to us that we can't take." And I was like, right, you're right. And from that day forward, I never cried another tear. I never complained about pain. I didn't complain about anything. I was just made up in my mind that there was nothing that they could do to me that I couldn't take. And I've taken that mindset with me and I've used that for the rest of my life. There's nothing that folks can do to me that I can't take. After I finished my training, my first duty station was in Panmunjom, Korea. Now, that in itself is a trip because one, I had no idea where Korea was, and two, the journey. Let me tell you about the journey. I left out of JFK in New York, 7 o'clock in the evening. All right. I fly from New York to Chicago, and then I fly from Chicago to St. Louis, and then from St. Louis, I was supposed to fly to Seattle, Washington. We get to Seattle and we can't land because there's too much fog. So we go to Spokane, Washington. We get to Spokane and we got to circle the airfield for about 45 minutes before we finally landed and people got off the plane. But all of us that were to go to Seattle had to stay on the plane. So we get back up in the air again and we're flying and the pilot comes on and said, "I'm sorry, but we can't land in Seattle. So we're going to Portland." Portland? All right. So I'm on this plane. There's nothing I can do about it. So I fly on to Portland. I get to Portland at 6 a.m. in the morning, West Coast time, which is 9 a.m. East Coast time. So now I've been on this plane at this juncture for 14 hours, 15 hours. All right. So anyway, we get off the plane in Portland, and then we have a 6 hour layover in Portland before we can catch a flight, or 5 hours, excuse me, before we can catch a flight to Seattle. We catch a flight to Seattle, finally, and we get there. It's a little late, but they hold our plane for us. We finally get there. We get over to the airport. The plane takes off, and then we fly from Seattle to Alaska. And so we get to Alaska, and then we have a 7 hour layover in the airport in Alaska. We don't leave Alaska until 8 p.m. Now, I told you I left JFK at 7 p.m. It's 8 p.m. or it's 8, there's 11. So that's 11 p.m. So now we're looking at I'm 26 hours. I'm nowhere near my destination. So we leave Alaska and fly to Tokyo, Japan. And when I get to Tokyo, I'm amazed. We have to deplane because we can't fly from Tokyo to Korea. So they give us chips and they allow us to put us up in a really nice hotel and gave us meal money and that kind of stuff and turn us loose on Tokyo. And I met a couple of guys and we went out and hung out and exchanged some money. And I know we got beat because we didn't know the exchange rate. And I'm 18 years old. I'm 6 months removed from high school, but we had a great time. Stayed in the hotel. The next morning, we get on the plane and we go the following, the remaining 2 hours into Korea. And when we get to Korea, oh my goodness. Tokyo is like a clean Manhattan, with all the skyscrapers and everything. Beautiful city, but it was clean. I mean, if you see a piece of paper on the ground, it looks out of place. It was beautiful. So we catch a flight from Tokyo to Korea. Now, as I'm flying over the water, getting close to Korea, I'm looking for buildings. I'm looking for tall buildings, but I couldn't see any tall buildings. All I saw was rice paddies, and I didn't know what a rice paddy was. Rice paddies everywhere, And so I fly in and get off the plane, and there was this smell that I will never forget for as long as I live. The smell was coming from the rice paddies. there's rice paddies all over the place when I was there. And what I didn't understand was during that period of time that they used human feces as fertilizer in these rice paddies. And so, oh my goodness, the smell was just incredible. And that's something that I'll never forget. Korea was so interesting. The people were beautiful. I had a great time with the people over there. Um, but when I got there, I had orders to go to Seoul. And so Seoul is the capital of Korea, and I got a chance to see a lot of Seoul later. And Seoul was a real nice place and stuff, good place to be. But when I got over there, they pulled my orders and they decided that to send me up into the Joint Security Area, Panmunjom, Korea. Um, and what's interesting about that is that's where they signed a military armistice agreement to stop the Korean conflict. Now, there was still small scale fighting going on over there, but you know, uh, you don't really hear about it here in the United States. When I graduated from basic training, the date was August 18th. There was a skirmish up there in Korea. And my drill sergeant asked, "Who has orders to go to Korea?" And I raised my hand. He said, "That's where you're going." I said, "Look, that's going to be so far away from where I'm going. I'm not even, I'm not worrying about it." Well, lo and behold, one of the guys that got killed during this little skirmish on August 18th, there was two officers that were axed to death. One of the guys would have been my immediate supervisor. Like my office is here, and literally 10 feet away was his office. So that's how close it was. So that guy was really prophetic. There's so many things that I would like to talk about with respect to Korea, but I'm gonna have to save those for the book because it's a really long story. But I grew up, so to speak, in Korea, in the DMZ, demilitarized zone, in a war zone. And so, as I said, there's nothing that nobody could do to me that I couldn't take. So up there in the DMZ, when I first got up there, it was frightening. But after a while, you realize that this is what war times are like, and you kind of adjust to it. Um, so I figured I'm out here with the M16 walking around these rice paddies, and in some of them were claymore mines or mines, to keep the people from the north coming down to the south, and from the south going north. So there was all kinds of stuff. So I was like, well, I'm doing this, but I can take it. There's nothing that anybody can do to me that I can't take. And I made it through, and I ended up getting orders to come back to the States. Now, the orders that I got were going to send me to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I'm like, "This is not." I just spent a year in Korea. I don't want to go to Missouri. Friends of mine called it misery. I didn't want to go out there, and I had a friend. Long story short, who introduced me to someone that got my orders changed at the Pentagon, and I went on to Washington D.C. to spend the remaining time in the military in the Old Guard, the President's Ceremonial Unit. I spent the rest of my time in the military in Washington, D.C., in the President's Ceremonial Unit in Washington, D.C. The Old Guard is what we're called. And the Old Guard is the oldest ceremonial unit in the United States. And it's really interesting because the honor company of the Old Guard guards the tomb of the unknown soldier. So if you've ever witnessed the guy that guards the tomb, those people are folks that you don't want to mess with, because they're very serious. They're very, very, very serious. But the Old Guard is a ceremonial unit. So anytime you see folks in Arlington Cemetery performing the funerals, or the soldiers that are around the White House or around the Capitol, if they're Army, they're all the Old Guard. So the Old Guard was definitely a great place to be. It was an elite unit and had to be a certain height and certain weight, and your uniforms had to be starched. There could be nothing. I mean, nothing wrong with your uniforms. So they were always highly starched, highly pressed. Its shoes were highly shined, and you would come into contact with all kinds of people every day in the old guard. My claim to fame was during one ceremony, I opened the door for Rosalind Carter, who at the time was the first lady, because Carter was president during that period of time. So I opened the door for him. Now, for some of you, I was like, you just opened the door, but for military, it's a really big thing. So I served the rest of my time there in Washington D.C., and I got out and went to school. What's interesting is when I got out of school, I moved back to D.C. for a while, and as a civilian, as a veteran, I got to see how other veterans were treated. And it's unfortunate because you see homeless veterans everywhere. Now, this is, we're always talking about how we cherish our veterans, how we love our veterans, but yet I would see homeless veterans everywhere. I mean, when I was there, the biggest soup kitchen in Washington, D.C. was only 4 blocks away from the White House. And there you see all manner of veterans. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we rely on our veterans to do so much to keep us free, to allow us to do the things that we want to do in this country, good or bad, Republican or Democrat. Here in this country, we have the ability to do those things because of the sacrifices that veterans have made. But yet, we're not seeing our people take care of the veterans the way they need to or should be. I mean, so many of these veterans put their life on the line to protect our freedoms. And what do they get in return? I had a friend of mine who served in Nam, and he got shot over there in Nam, and it was so bad, he was going home, and they were going to send one of his brothers over. So he re-enlisted for another term over in Nam, so his brother wouldn't have to go. And then while he was over there serving the second time, he got shot again. And while he was convalescing, they were getting ready to send him back to the States, and they're going to send his other brother over. And so he enlisted again and got shot again while he was over there. But he figured that he didn't want his brothers to have to go through the hell that he had been put through in Nam. And then during times of war, he functioned at a very, very high level, very high level. If you were in war, this is the person that you want to be around. I mean, yeah, he got shot, but he saved hundreds of people as a result of it. And could you imagine you re-enlist twice to keep your brothers from coming over there to experience what was going on over there? And as I said before, during times of war, he functioned at a very high level. But during peace times, he didn't function well. And he got no help. So this Veterans Day, I want you all to keep the veterans in mind. And if you can help a vet by any means or any stretch of imagination, please do so. Help the vets. All you veterans, man, I got nothing but love for you all, because I know what you've been through. Now, I know for Veterans Days, there's a lot of restaurants and stores and things of that nature that are attempting to look out for veterans. So I ask all of you all, if you know of any, hit me up. Okay. In the meantime, y'all be blessed. I love you, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Peace. This has been another episode of In the Black of My Mind podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. Until next week, y'all be blessed.